All right, so I'm going to recap the quotient rule because this one's going to be a little bit harder. So remember, low, high. So I'm doing the low times derivative of high, and then minus high, and then derivative of the low. So I teach my students low d high minus high d low, all over low squared. So repeat after me. Low d high minus high d low, all over low squared. We're going to practice that in a minute. And then, of course, here's still my exponent rule again that I'm powering down. And then last but not least is chain rule. And this one's probably the trickiest. And this one I have students remember with doubter, dinner. So I'm doing the derivative of the outer times the derivative of the inner. So doubter, dinner. Think of it this way. You take a girl out to go to dinner. So doubter, dinner. And we're going to see some of those in a second, and we'll practice on those. All right, so every problem that you look at, you have to decide what's the specialty that's going on and what rule are you going to use. So let's look at the first one. Okay, so when I look at this, of course, one of the first things I notice is that there's a multiplication. So I go up and I look at the product rule. And the product rule was first times derivative of the second plus second times derivative of the first. So that's how I'm going to proceed. So I've got to do first, which is the first parentheses, times the derivative, so here's the first, times derivative of the second. So now I've got to do derivative of this. Well, I'm going to pretend like the rest of the stuff isn't there, and I'm going to just look at what's inside the parentheses. And so I have to power down the first term, so 7 times that coefficient, and then decrease the power by 1. And then remember on the second piece, that's x to the 0 again, so if I multiply the 0 and the 10, I don't get anything extra. So there's first times derivative of the second. Now I have to do second, so plus second, well the second is x to the 7th plus 10 times derivative of the first. So I'm only going to look inside that first parentheses, and I'm going to power down, so 3, now it's x squared minus, and then I'm doing 1 times 3, so I'll get 3 x to the 0, but I don't usually go around writing x to the zeros. So that's it. And then of course I can distribute. Keep in mind that I had to make sure that I FOILed on this last part. And so now I'm going to collect my like terms. And there's my final answer. Okay, let's look at the next one. So again, I notice that there's multiplication happening between the two terms. So I'm still going to use the product rule. Remember, first times derivative of the second plus second times derivative of the first. So the first is the entire parentheses, so I'm going to write that down, times derivative of the second, but derivative of the second, of course, I have to power down, so 5 times 1 in front, and then power down, plus the second, which is x to the 5th, times derivative of the first, and so I'm going to power down inside those parentheses each term. And of course the last one just gives me 7x to the 0, which is just 1. So now I'm going to distribute, and it should look like that. Remember, you're adding your exponents when you're multiplying. And then when I collect like terms, I get 9x to the 8th plus 42x to the 5th. Let's try the next one. Okay, so this is the one where I'm going to have to employ chain rule. And so the first thing I did was I rewrote it so that it has an exponent. And I'm going to pause the video here because I'll need to restart the video on another section.